Okay, it is exactly noon. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar Wednesday. My name is Elizabeth Rico, and I'm Outreach Manager of Leadership and Business Development here at the Arizona Farm Bureau. I'm really excited this month because we have some resident experts with us. We have Luke Messer and Madeline Greenbaum with the ADEQ here to talk to us about agricultural dust outreach. Luke and Madeline, will you go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, thanks. This is Madeline Greenbaum. I've been with ADEQ for about 4 years now, and we're the agricultural air quality inspectors. There's just the two of us for the state, but we're with Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and we primarily oversee the ag BMPs, or the agricultural best management practices.
Hi, I'm Luke. I've been working with ADEQ for about 3.5 years, and echoing Madeline, we cover the whole state, and it looks like with the attendance list, I know most of you already.
And I apologize, you can't see me. Unfortunately, my camera looks like I'm green, so we're just gonna not show my face here.
That's okay. Like I said, every time we've done this, there's been some technology hiccup in some capacity. So I think everybody is a little bit used to some of those things that pop up, especially with having to adapt to everything with COVID. So I'm sure everybody forgives you, Madeline. So we're excited because we actually, Madeline and Luke both reached out to Arizona Farm Bureau wanting to get in touch with our members and kind of get out some of their information. They had some asks or some interests here in several different counties with some questions, more, I'll call them complaints for lack of a better word, and wanting to figure out a good way to get out to members and have a conversation with them. So Chelsea McGuire actually reached out and suggested that we do a webinar. So we're really excited to have them on, get some of their expertise. And remember that while we can't see or hear you, we have a chat feature available that we would love for you to ask your questions and interact with us, and we'll ask or address all of your questions here at the very end. So Madeline, if you want to go ahead and give us your presentation and start sharing your screen.
Sure thing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, and I'll present. Oh, hold on 1 second here. Let me move this. There we go.
Looks good.
Okay, great. Yep, so again, I'm Madeline Greenbaum, and we're presenting with Luke Messer. We're both the ADEQ Air Quality Agricultural, we're the agricultural inspectors of the state, and we are going to present just for dust specifically. We've noticed that there's just been a little bit of an uptick in dust in the general Cochise-Wilcox area.
So for any farmer that might get inspected, we have some guidelines here. We're mostly complaint driven. We respond to all complaints. That doesn't mean we inspect on all complaints. If we've been out to your farm already and talked to you about something and the same issue comes up within a relatively short time span, we'll just give you a call and ask if there's anything new going on, or what's changed that might have caused the complaint. So when we're trying to find a farmer, that's one of the hardest parts of the job. We don't have a list to go by. So if we have your contact information, or if we can get it fairly easily, whether that's an online search or calling a neighbor that we already know, we'll go ahead and do that and reach out to you. If we can't, and it's a somewhat urgent inspection, the complaint is made a big deal out of it, or it sounds like it could be serious, we'll go out on site and evaluate and take pictures as necessary from a public access point, whether that's a public road or the highway or whatever. We try not to drive on farm access roads. We want to be respectful of your property. And the main goal that we do inspections or respond to complaints is to minimize dust and make sure that the farm is taking reasonable precautions to prevent dust, or in the case of Pinal or Pima County, following AgBMPs, which is the best management practices. So Madeline, if you could. So there's a section of the Arizona Revised Statutes 49, the 49 section. Part of it talks about what the state can do, and part of it talks about what county air quality agencies can do. So Maricopa County, Pinal County, and Pima County have their own air quality districts. This rule is written into the county section of the rules. So they are not allowed to inspect on farms, basically is what this is saying. So anytime you get a inspector out, if you have land in those counties, inquire about this, inquire about ADEQ and what their jurisdiction is. You'll most likely be seeing us. They know to reach out to us at this point, but if they have a new inspector or someone has a concern that it might be abandoned land rather than a farm field, there might be some jurisdictional issues. So for counties where the AgBMP doesn't apply, there is this 609 rule, which just requires that any person farming, doing tillage, or putting down fertilizers has to take reasonable precautions to prevent excessive amounts of particulate matter from becoming airborne. And none of that is defined. Reasonable precautions is up to interpretation, as is excessive amounts of particulate matter. But generally, if you can make a good argument that someone else coming out and seeing, another farmer coming out and seeing the land would say, yeah, that's a good way to do things. That's a pretty solid reason. And if you want further proof or to be able to show that you're taking reasonable precautions, you can go to the AgBMPs for the rest of the non-attainment areas. So Pinal and Maricopa County, they have a list. Madeline, if you want to skip to the next one.
Sure, yeah.
So the AgBMPs are a good way to show that you're taking reasonable precautions. There's a checklist of practices, and if you can pick out practices out of that form and say, we're already doing these, and these, that's a really good way to show that it's reasonable. And those wouldn't be required. You wouldn't have to show that you're doing those AgBMPs because they're not required in areas outside of non-attainment, which Cochise is in attainment. But it's a good way to show that you're going above and beyond.
And so now that we're talking about AgBMPs, here's an example of a form. So this is the Agriculture Best Management Practices General Permit form that we give Maricopa County cropland farmers. So they just have to fill out their information and they have to complete their form annually. You can tell that all of our AgBMPs were divided by category. So there's tillage, harvest, the farm roads, and then the actual cropland itself. And then significant earth moving activities. That's when you're moving your land. It's not leveling or tilling, but it's maybe creating a road, or any time that you're going deeper than 4 inches into the dirt. We want to kind of control the dust there. So these aren't required for your area, only if you are in the not serious non-attainment area like Maricopa County. But this is a really good way to show that you are doing reasonable precautions. So if you're only doing a couple of these, that shows Luke and I, that you are kind of following what best reasonable way you can to minimize your dust input, right? And so all of these options, they are, described, and they're in the Arizona Revised Statutes if you're kind of confused on what they mean. And you can also ask us too, you can call us. And so this is a picture that we took in the field. I believe this is the Wilcox area or Cochise County. And these reasonable precautions is just to minimize that dust, right? So our main issue or concern is if the dust comes up and then goes off of the property and goes into someone else's property. So that's mainly where we're getting our complaints from, is that when dust is blowing off the farm's property and blowing onto their property. So the majority of these incidences are during high wind days. So that's like a day when, or a time that the wind is higher than 15 miles per hour. And so this is just a recently planted field. And you can see kind of in the foreground here that there is some water on, but still the dust is being lifted up by the air and the wind and being carried off land. And this is another picture that I took during an inspection. This is not in Cochise County, but this is a really good picture, a good example of what that dust can do. So as you can see on the top right corner and kind of in the middle there, that's the actual original farm soil. It is really well crusted over. This is a fallow field. This is actually one of the best crusts I've seen when I've been in the field. And usually when I'm doing inspections, I have my steel-toed boots on and I do a big stomp into the soil. You can see in the middle there, you can see how deep that really fine powdery soil is. And that soil actually did not originate from this field. That was wind-blown dust originated from somewhere else, different fields. And you can see how fine that is. So that soil is just dried up and then gets blown around and then can be an issue for other farmers or other landowners. And I mean, we are very much aware of the meteorological conditions of the area, of how dry it is, of the wind storms, the dust storms, you know, in the soil. But we know that there are ways to mitigate the dust, minimize it. And so we've been seeing that a lot of land clearing can create a lot of dust. It loosens up the soil. And then it could, you know, you saw the picture before that it's very fine. It can dry up very easily and can blow around during those high winds. So what we recommend is to minimize that time between the land clearing and the leveling to when you put water down. So we want to put the water down as soon as possible, and that really helps to reduce the dust. So in order to do that, we also recommend, you know, we're trying to develop the areas that can be effectively controlled. You know, how many acres you are doing. We're trying to develop the acres that you can quickly do it and then put water down, put your irrigation lines in. And so then this is the way that you minimize that time that the soil is loose, it's dry, it's on top of the land. Without water. So that just minimizes the time slot that this wind or whatever is picking up that dust and blowing it somewhere else. Luke?
Yeah, so if you're moving into a new area or you know someone is coming in from out of town or out of state and they're not familiar with the soil conditions, we want to point out this resource. The National Resource Conservation Service has a soil survey. The website's at the bottom there. Madeline, if you'll skip to the next one. So they have a map viewer on this tool where you can identify an area of interest. They've already got a few selected. There's one that shows just the entire area around Wilcox, but you can focus in on other parts of the state as well. Next one, Madeline. So yeah, here's the Wilcox area. It's already identified. You can click in and zoom into any of these parts of the screen there and pick out what the soil type has been identified as. So this particular one is the area around San Simon. And if you find an area roughly this size, it will break down what the soil types are. So next one, Madeline. And so here's the profile for that particular identified area. It's got 3 different types there. You can click on each of those in the website, and it'll give you a soil profile, including like the soil texture, the pH levels, other characteristics that might indicate that it would be more likely to blow away once you've tilled it. So if it's a high silt content or whatever, it'll be more likely to get picked up and blown away in a high wind. So you would want to factor that in when you're clearing a new field.
So speaking of San Simone, this was a couple of years ago, and this is exactly kind of what we're trying to do outreach about, to educate, and we just want to prevent something like this from happening again. It was a dangerous situation. ADEQ had to come in and help. It was converted native desert land to a farm orchard. And we want to minimize the dust activities, and we do not want them to impact public safety that might require emergency intervention. Because as you can see, let me get to the next one. It was an emergency situation, and we really want to prevent that. And our main goal is to, protect the public safety, while working with you guys. You can ask us any kind of questions. We're not here we don't bite, and we're fairly, educated about the area and the farming practices. And a lot of the times, we work with counties, different departments, and even different departments within ADEQ, like the water department or something like that. And a lot of times we are the advocate for the farmers, and we know kind of like what you guys are doing, what you're going through, and we know what rules and regulations you guys, have to follow. And a lot of the times, we can talk to them for you, and we are the primary people who are being contacted by, your neighbors, the complainants, and we're just that liaison between, those two worlds. So let us know if you have any questions, if you're just concerned about something. Here's our contact information, and then I'm sure that we can also provide our emails as well.
Perfect, Madeline. Thank you for that. And just a reminder that this is a recorded webinar, so we'll have this up on our website. So we'll also have this contact information that I will link to it as well. That way everybody has all of this information, but Madeline, you can go ahead and leave it up there for a couple minutes. Well, let's open it up to some questions, and we actually got one from Chelsea. She asked, what is the typical result when a complaint is given to ADEQ? What's the impact of the farm being cited? That's a great question, Chelsea. I actually was going to ask something similar. So Madeline or Luke, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take it. So we receive complaints a multitude of different ways from a different agency, or directly to us. Eventually that complaint gets to Madeline or I, and like I said earlier, we'll, depending on the severity of what's being complained on, either we'll reach out to you if we can, or we'll go out to the site and check it out and then reach out to you. What's the impact of a farm being cited? So this is it's really rare for a farm to be cited. There has to be, some neglect done, or you've purposefully cleared such a large area that you can't control the dust coming off of it with the equipment you have on site. At that point, we try to work with you the best we can. If you're willing to work with us, that either comes in the result of a notice of opportunity to correct, if it's something relatively minor, or if it's a bigger issue, it might be a notice of violation. At that point, we would come up with things that might help mitigate the situation, and we would require the farmer to meet those obligations. So it might be, develop a plan to get back into compliance. If you have hundreds of acres that you've cleared and you don't have any way to get water to it, it's a difficult solution, but it might be, expedite the getting water onto the field, come up with a plan to minimize dust and keep us updated, so that kind of thing. Is that helpful, Chelsea?
Great. So we had another question come in. And this one says, whether farming or development kicking up dust, what's the average monthly number of complaints that you guys receive?
I'd say it really depends on the area and the situation. So I believe one of the reasons why we did this outreach, I think it was, what was it, Luke, like 10 or something for this area, but we usually don't have very little complaints. So it really depends on, if there's a lot of new farms coming in the area, if it's planting season, and also, if there's high winds too, if it was a really windy day and someone was, going out there and leveling, we might get a lot of complaints. And it also really depends on the proximity of the farm to residential areas or businesses. So I think that it depends on the area, but we did see the uptick, I believe, early spring this year.
Yeah,
Madeline, we had a request to go back to the slide that talked about different soil types, if you wouldn't mind. And then I have a question while you're doing that. What's the most popular solution that ADEQ provides when you have a call or complaint that comes in?
That depends really on what the complaint is. So the most common complaint we get is just, something's going on in this field, I see dust. And at that point, typically we'll reach out to the farmer and say, what are you doing? How much longer are you going to be doing it? When are you going to have water down to control the dust? And usually reaching out to the complainant after we get that information is sufficient. They're more concerned about why is this happening and how long is it going to last? They don't really know the farming, so explaining that to them usually placates them.
Great, thanks for answering that. We had another question come in from Paco Allerton. Hi Paco, glad you could join us. And he asked, what determines the percent of the area of interest?
So all that information is from the NRCS soil survey website. I don't have anything to do with that. ADEQ doesn't have anything to do with that, so I can't answer that. But it,
I believe area of interest is this box. That's what I'm assuming.
yeah,
Right, so we created this box on the map and then it outputs, let me go back to there. So I believe that this would be the percent of that area that we put onto the map. And then according to their studies, their published studies, this is the soil type that they found in that box that you can create by yourself.
Perfect. So what you're saying is that if somebody creates their own area of interest, those percentages will kind of self-generate depending on where they choose.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Perfect. That's incredibly helpful. What's the most popular area of the state that you see the most complaints or the most issues with? And this isn't to hurt anybody's feelings. We love every county equally, but where do you guys typically receive the most calls about?
For me, I am typically in Maricopa County and Pinal. And I'd say when it's like planting season or anything like that, it is, the highly or more densely populated areas, especially, these farms are jutting right up against the neighborhoods. And a lot of the times, if it was in a more rural part of the state, no one would be complaining, right? So I work with a lot of the farmers that really have to be very touchy, very aware of the wind direction, the wind speed, what direction are their closest neighbors, things like that. And I tell them a lot, if they're tilling, go slower. Also, I have farms that have to be aware of traffic times too. What time is there a school across the street and when's pickup time? Things like that. And so they really have to be aware of their neighbors. You know, and I'm very cognizant of, you know, they create dust. That's a part of farming, right? But there's a lot of people, a lot of eyes on them. So that's, I deal with that a lot.
That's a great point. One of the other questions that came in was, do you anticipate more windblown accidents? Wow, that was tough for me to say, due to the drought.
I've recently had to discuss an increase in fallow fields due to the drought. And I know that getting water on the fields has been an issue, and it might be a bigger issue in the future. And that picture of the fallow field with the kind of that really powdery, here, let me try to get back to it. That is in an area of the state where we've been finding a lot of fallow fields, and it's a concern of ADEQs that we're going to see a lot more, because you know, if they're not crusted over like this, there might be a lot more you know, just windblown dust in the area. So it might turn into a dust bowl, but
We had a question come in asking if you could go over any resources or provide any resources that could help in creating a dust mitigation strategy for orchards. Is there a place to find something like that?
I was in the process of typing up an answer, but I'll give it live.
To it.
Yeah, so the NRCS is helpful with the soil types like the map showed. Rusty Van Leuven is on here from the Department of Ag. He might be able to help answer some questions, but if you have something more specific about what requirements will show that you're taking reasonable precautions, we can help you with outreach for that as well. I would also recommend reaching out to farmers in your area that already are established. They tend to have already figured out what works in that particular place. So that can be another option.
Another question is, who most commonly is the person or people who contact ADEQ with some of these complaints?
Neighbors are number one. Rarely we have people that if they're driving by on a road and they see dust, they'll complain, but it's almost always people that live nearby that are either, they think it's an eyesore that there's dust there, or they're impacted directly by the dust, like it's blowing into their pool or covering their newly washed car or something like that. That's typically what we see.
right. And I think I said during the presentation, one of the major concerns is when the dust comes from the farm property onto someone else's property. I think that's where the majority of our complaints originate from, is someone is seeing dust coming from the farm's property, blowing, right, like blowing into their pool, you know, and they have to clean it up. So that's a lot of the times what kind of calls we get.
If somebody does call and complain to ADEQ, after you've located the source of the problem, so let's say it's a nearby farmer, do you follow back and circle back to whoever it was that called and complained and let them know the status of it? Or do you find that they typically call multiple times about the same issue?
On our complaint form, we do have an option if they want a follow-up. Sometimes they don't. And so it's a part of ADEQ's protocol, and we respond to every complaint. So if a complaint comes in, we're supposed to contact them back within 2 days of them putting in the complaint or calling us. And then we, either we determine if an inspection is needed, or if we talk to, the farmer or whomever, or send it to a different jurisdiction like Maricopa County, for instance, or any kind of county, we are supposed to follow back up with them, kind of discuss with them, our actions, what's going to, happen, reassure them, or, the status of the inspection if they request it.
That's good to know. I'm glad you guys look through every contact form. I'm sure sometimes that can be a pretty laborious task. What typically is the turnaround time if somebody does call and complain or have something they bring to your attention? What's the turnaround time typically for answering those?
So just getting back to them and talking to them about it would be about 2 days, depending on when we get the complaint. Obviously, if it's a Friday or they submit it on a Saturday, we might not make that, but that's the goal. And typically, I mean, depending on the severity, our secondary goal then would be, if it needs an inspection, to get out within a week or so, if we can. Obviously, that's not always the case. We might be already booked for that week or otherwise engaged.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any other questions there in the Q&A box. So Madeline, if you would go back to your contact information really quick, just so we can pop that up on the screen one more time. And then again, this goes up on our Arizona Farm Bureau site. If you haven't explored that, just know that there's a library of all of the webinars that we've done this year, as well as some of the webinars that have gone on in the past. So those are really great resources if you've happened to have missed any ones in the past, or you just want to go back through and look at some of that information. We do have that. And here is Madeline and Luke's information. When I have this up on the website, I'll go ahead and put their information on there as well. Madeline, Luke, thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to work with us. And really glad that we got this together. And if we have any other specific information from counties, we'll definitely be sure to get some of that out to our County Farm Bureau leaders so they can have some specific information for their counties. But thank you guys for joining us. And I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. And then take care. We'll see you guys next month, the last Wednesday of every month for our Wednesday webinar series. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.